want to welcome everyone. We're going to give a couple minutes for folks to come in, but if you wouldn't mind while we're waiting, maybe put into the chat, where you're coming from, if you are faculty, staff, admin, parent, student, let us know who we're chatting with today. I want to welcome everyone today. My name is Bethany Smith. I am DPREP's Director of Safety. Today, we've brought together this panel of higher education and law enforcement professionals to talk about women's safety on campus. Much of what we're talking about will apply to students of any gender, but women and female presenting students face particular challenges and safety risks and concerns on campus. So we want to address some of those today. Some of that is shown in some of the statistics we see. We look at crime on campus, and we're seeing that those crimes are reported through the Clery Act. Most common are burglary, followed by forcible sex offenses and theft. So those sex offenses are a large part of what we'll be talking about today, how we can protect students and protect ourselves. The rate of forcible sex offenses on campus has been declining in recent years, but it's still a high concern and is higher than the national average outside of college campuses. Women are far more likely to be victims of sexual assault on campus. And students of color are more likely than white students to be victims of crime on campus. So that's something we're also going to want to address today. Our panel today, joining us, we have Sylvia Chapa, who recently retired after 23 years in higher education law enforcement, most recently at College of the Mainland in Texas. Nina Delgadillo is a retired senior special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, where she served for many years and is currently the Director of Safety and Emergency Preparedness for Panthera 7. Dr. Tammy Hodo is here. She is the owner of All Things Diverse, a Navy veteran and worked in academia for many years. Heather Heider is a forensic consultant with Axiom Forensics with over 25 years of experience in law enforcement and investigations. Heidi Hunsberger is a lieutenant with Vassar College's Campus Safety Department and has over 25 years experience in law enforcement and higher education campus safety. Michelle Neuenhaus is here from Pima County Community College District in Arizona, where she serves on their police force. Joining us in a little bit, we'll have Lindsay Harden, a mental health counselor who works in emergency services and private practice. So I think the best way we want to get folks a chance to meet all of you. So I'm going to go around and ask each of you, what is the piece of advice that you wish you had when you started college, or what you offer first when you're talking to students as far as safety on campus and how to feel safe and secure on campus? Nina, why don't I go ahead and toss to you first, and then maybe we can popcorn around the group.
Thank you for that introduction. I think that when I look at campus safety, one of the first things that comes to mind is how we can improve our campus safety and your personal safety. I would start with situational awareness. This is something that from the very beginning, a conversation that we need to have with our incoming students and our returning students and staff as well. So that's the one thing that I would hone in on immediately is situational awareness. And then all these other components will come into play, such as how you deal with reporting things that are safety related on campus, where you would seek for assistance and seek for help and support if you have mental health issues. All these things come around to improving your personal safety. I would start with situational awareness.
Heidi, do you want to share anything?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think the best piece of advice I would have would be to get to know the resources available on your college campus. As security professionals or law enforcement professionals, it is our job to get that information out to you, but it's good to do a little bit of your own research and find out what things are available on your campus. Like our campus offers shuttle services, a whole host of on-call support for students from SABP to on-call counseling services. So just get to know what your college has so you can best utilize all the resources available to you.
I think my kids are a little warped, unfortunately, since we're just pretty straight shooters with them. Situational awareness, and our term in our family is head on a swivel. That means don't be looking at your phone while you're trying to go from course to course, or you're crossing a street. You're just asking to be a target at that point. So the situational awareness is huge. Head on a swivel at all times. Know your exits, know your surroundings. This idea of guardianship, having other people know where you are, whether that's an application, whether that's you're telling a friend, whether that's walking with a friend, that kind of stuff. Those are huge. My daughter is going to be 20 and she is a college student. She knows as she walks out the door, head on a swivel.
Sylvia, you spent a lot of time at a community college and might have a unique perspective for that group. Do you have any advice?
What the panelists have said thus far, I agree 100%. I think the situational awareness piece needs to be out there stronger. Not only do you have to be aware of it, it's something you have to practice. You have to really hone in on those skills. It's not something you just hear about in a conversation. You have to practice it, implement it into your life. I wish I would have known more about situational awareness. Also, too, that we are responsible. I wish I would have known at the time. We are responsible for our own safety first because we are in the situation before anyone else. So we are, and this is what I used to preach at all my training presentations, is that we have to change the mindset that we are our first responders. We are responsible for our safety first. And that's just to be aware of things going on, the situational awareness. Another thing is that you can't go to college thinking that you should expect safety, but you have to be realistic in that things do happen, that there are sexual predators out there, and that nobody has a right to touch you unless you want it. That don't feel guilty if something does happen. It's not your fault. The resources, very important to have those resources and to be aware of. I think from what I have encountered at a community college all these years, we have to get better at letting these students know that we are there for them, that we have departments that can discuss issues with them and help them through whatever they may be encountering that is of a negative nature. We want students to feel safe.
Can I
Tammy, do
jump
you
in on?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Do you mind if I tag on to that, Sylvia? I think
go ahead.
one of the things that we look at too is when we send our kids or my grandkids, I have grandkids in college now, which is scary. The conversations that we have with our children and loved ones when they go away to college sometimes doesn't include those things that you're talking about, how you're responsible for things. And we live in such a digital age and social media age that it is scary because everywhere they go, they forecast on social media, oh, I'm going to this party at this time. It's really a double-edged sword because they want to be social. They're getting away from their parents for the first time, perhaps. But at the same time, they don't understand that there are predators out there and they're looking for where you're going, who you're going with, what time you're leaving, right? And that's a challenge that I frankly didn't have. And so we have to look at where we are now in society to figure out how we change situational awareness and how we approach it.
Great point. Great point.
Some of the things I would add, obviously, I agree with everything that's been said, but I do want to share that I myself was not a traditional college student. I am a veteran of the military. And so when I went into college at 22, I knew about the buddy system, right? So when you're in the military, we really focus on the buddy system. And so I would say that situational awareness also, like I find my son, he shares his location and a lot of his friends do with one another. And that way they know where they are. I just put it out there. I'm a woman of color. My son is an African-American male. We have Life 360. I'm tracking them all the time. You know, that's the America I live in. And then also we have to remember that universities and colleges are a microcosm of society. So you're going to have people there who are pedophiles. You're going to have people there who are rapists. You are going to have people there who are there for not so good things. I was a faculty member at a university in Virginia, and there was a student from another campus that went missing. Virginia has changed the law now, but what happened was she was downtown in a particular area. She was with some friends. They allowed her to leave and no one followed and went with her. It was very apparent on surveillance that she had too much to drink. I walked up on her as if he knew her, led her away, and she's deceased. And come to find out, this gentleman had moved from college to college in Virginia because he kept getting expelled for Title IX issues, but it was not documented on his transcripts. And the state of Virginia is now documented if you are dismissed for a Title IX issue. So I think the best way, we have battle buddies. And I think that's imperative. I think we have to recognize and practice what we would call in the military good OPSEC. So if I see something, I say something. I mean, just recently, I'm calling in from Jacksonville, Florida. We just had a rapper from Jacksonville, some young guy, don't know his name, but rest his soul, who shared his location, had a party down in Tampa, got kicked out of the Airbnb, went to a hotel, shared his location on social media. 3 people from Jacksonville went down there and gunned him down and robbed him. We know Kim Kardashian, remember when she shared her location and they came and they robbed her for all her jewelry. That social media component, recognizing we're a microcosm on campus of society, sharing our locations, which my son, his friend group, they do that. And I think that's so important. Utilizing those shuttle services on campus if it's late and you're attending a party or whatever. And again, emphasize the buddy system. If I go to a party with you, guess what? You're coming with me. When it's time to go, we're leaving together. I just think those are all very important things to consider. It really echoes what you all have already said.
Michelle, thank you for joining us. Do you have anything you want to share at this stage?
I do have one that builds into all of this, planning. You have to plan, do a little recon mission if it's possible. Know where your buildings are, know where your classes are. Don't get caught running late. Now you make a poor decision because you're behind the curve and maybe you don't park in a safe place and you park somewhere remote, or you take the back stairwell at nighttime because it's a shortcut for you. Make sure you plan, know where you're going. Talk to your classmates if it's a nighttime class. Find out where everybody's parking for that class, park where they park. And you've got to have that awareness. We talk about that situational awareness. Think about your environment, not just in the daylight when you can see clearly. Think about it when you're disadvantaged with areas that aren't well lit, have blind corners that are remote. Speak up. I know at our institution, we've got a 24/7 dispatcher and we tell people, if you got lights out or they're not coming on, you've got a dark space, please report that to us. We will forward that to our facility staff. We want to get right on top of that. Know your resources, right? And make sure that you're part of everybody's safety planning and have your plan ready.
Can I just add what Michelle was saying? Another incident that sadly I'm aware of is we have to be very cautious. There was a situation where there was a lecture that was going to happen in the evening time. And someone I know was going to it. They were in a school in Louisiana. One of their professors that they knew was sitting on the bench talking to this gentleman who my friend assumed was another student as they're talking with the professor. And the professor said, I think you have to go around the back of the building in order to get in. The guy offered to walk my friend to the back of the building to get in. He indeed was not a student. He took her and held her for 48 hours and did some ungodly things to her and traumatized her for the rest of her life. But the assumption, which I would have assumed too, if he's sitting on the bench with a faculty member that I know, is that they know one another. But he didn't. He had planned it out. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew how to play the game. And we have people who come on our college campuses who do not go to our colleges. And it's just like a hunting ground for some people. And that's what this individual did. So again, I think the resources, the buddy system, recognizing that everyone on campus is not necessarily a student or a faculty or staff member.
I know we've talked a lot about situational awareness, and that might be a new term for some folks. Nina, we have actually taught, and I know you teach now, full hour, 90-minute courses in situational awareness. Are there some things you can pull out from that? Explain what are some of the top things that people need to be looking out for, suggestions in that space, and if there are ways for folks to maybe learn some of those skills, if there's self-defense classes that teach those skills, what you would recommend in that space.
Yeah, there's so much, like you said, you could do this for 2 hours, right? And we could have all kinds of topics that we would touch upon. Probably one of the ones that we haven't really touched on yet is the whole cell phone, right? Everyone, including students and faculty, are looking down at their cell phones as they're walking across campuses. You can't have situational awareness when you don't even see what's around you. This is one of the things that really hone in on and say, listen, I get the attraction to the phone. You've got appointments, you've got all kinds of things. You've got TikTok, conversations with friends, you've got all these things going on, but not understanding where you're going and what's happening around you and what's your baseline. We talk about finding out what your baseline is, right? What's normal. You don't know if you're outside that baseline if you're looking down at a phone. So it's one of those things that we really start off, especially college students, right? because we know probably 20 years ago, I was in Italy and I saw everybody in the street walking around with their phone. And I thought, what is wrong with these people? I thought that was so strange. Fast forward to where we are now, everybody's doing it. If you look around, people watch, look at how many people are not engaged with their cell phone as they're walking. And that will tell you how much of a breeding ground it is for things to happen. And Chief Neuhaus, you talked about being aware on your campus and everything. One of the examples I was talking with a partner about was you get into an elevator. This lady gets into an elevator in an office building. It's late at night. She's working on something. She takes the elevator down. She's like on the 20th floor. She goes down. It stops at the 14th floor. And this individual and she's waiting to get into the elevator. And she sees this man and she doesn't recognize him. It seems odd for him to be there because she's there so late. And she has that sixth sense, right? Something's not right here. Usually nobody else is in this building this late but me. We're one of the only societies so worried about being polite. We go into the elevator. What we're trying to do is educate people about finding what that baseline is. What's normal behavior? We want to look at behaviors, right? We want to say, is this normal for this person to be in this building? No. Is it strange that I've never seen this person, especially this late in this building? Yes. Should I get in that elevator? No. So it's one of those things that there's so many components to situational awareness, but I like to start off with the things that hit us the most frequent, that really everybody can relate to. And everybody can relate to taking a shortcut on campus and going through the dark spots because it saves us 3 minutes of time to cross that part of campus. Whereas that doesn't equate safety for yourself. You don't want to be in a confined space when you're facing something that's dangerous. We talk about that. We talk about how you walk. I talk to this with students all the time about how you present yourself. If you're walking with your head down and your shoulders drawn, what does that convey about your confidence in yourself? I see a lot of you nodding, so jump in anytime you want. These skills that we can share with them to just point out to them. They have these skills. They're just not really in tune to them right now. They're in tune to other things. So really, it's our job to enlighten them about some of these other things that are every day. We all have situational awareness. People say, I don't know what that is. I have neighbors that have asked me, what is situational awareness? And I said, you do it every day. You just don't realize you do it. If you're my neighbor next door and you see some van out front and nobody seems to be in the van, nobody's seen this van before, like driving up and down and then parking, does that seem unusual to you? And so that is situational awareness because you know what your baseline is, you know what your surroundings are, and this doesn't fit. So should I ask probing questions? Should I figure out, is there a reason why this car is there? So it's the same thing with teaching situational awareness on campuses, right? You talk to them about what their baseline is. Is it normal for this person to be here? Is it normal for this area to be dark and should I be going in that area? No. So there's some very basic things. If you feel threatened, go into one of the campus buildings and immediately look for help. Go for a lit area, right? So all these things we think are common sense. It's just that we need to refresh their memory and bring attention to them. We got to meet them where they're at, is what I'm saying. If anybody can jump in on that, I think that's really important. And I think all of you probably have experience.
Yeah, I'd like to add too, that's great information. You talk about that sixth sense, and what I like in my safety presentations, I like to push the idea of body language because we all have that skill from children on, but we lose sight of it. You can develop those skills, which is part of your sixth sense, reading body language. And I used to teach a body language safety course. People are going to indicate what they are going to do. And I also like to say that women particularly are raised to be polite. We don't have to be polite. You can be firm, make that eye contact, that body language. For law enforcement officers, the body language is a command presence. And many times that will avert the situation. I say reading body language for safety, but perpetrators are doing the same thing. They're reading your body language for easy targets. So it's used by both the perpetrator and your everyday citizen, student, faculty, what have you. But you can develop, there are courses out there to develop your reading body language, being aware, making a plan, as stated earlier, knowing your exit routes, knowing that little gut feeling is telling you, don't do that. Always follow that. You have to practice this all the time. Like I said, you just can't have a discussion about it and then forget about it. It has to be a constant practice of what if game, not to be paranoid, but to be empowered. The importance of safety is to empower people, to give them tools to avert situations that could potentially come their way. I think that's important. I think you had some great information there, and we need to put that out there on the forefront that you are responsible for your safety yourself, first and foremost, because you're going to be in the situation before anybody else. Don't give people ammunition. People are watching. They're doing the research. Who's my easy target? Don't be the target.
If I can add to that, you're spot on. And I think it goes along with what the chief was saying as well. The planning component, there's this recognition and identification, being comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, making that eye contact. We've taught our children from early on that that's a huge deterrent. Make eye contact that's creeping you out. Stare right at them. And so you have that confidence, and that's an uncomfortable thing to do. That's an uncomfortable thing to make eye contact, to keep eye contact, but be confident enough in yourself. So the planning component, but like Sylvia was saying, you have to practice it and you have to be comfortable in that uncomfortable kind of scenario, especially as a female, especially having been taught to be polite your entire life. Even with adults where you're still feeling like a kid at 18 and 19 years old, and you have this 40, 50-year-old man that's coming towards you. I think that the practice, we play what if games with our kids. I did preface it by saying that our children are warped, but we've always played situational what if games. We would take family vacations where we made them get us from point A to point B without a cell phone GPS. Give them a Thomas guide, make them figure out how to use a map without a cell phone. Little things like that, but it requires the training, it requires the uncomfortableness, telling your kids it's okay to look somebody in the eyes and be firm.
Those are
Advice.
great points. I think there's one other thing that I'd like to touch upon, and I hope everybody can jump in on this one too, is looking at behaviors, right? So I keep thinking of different examples of behaviors that people can observe. What happened is I went to a track meet and I'm just enjoying the events that are taking place. And I see this one individual, and he's one of the guys on the team. So I'm thinking, okay, he belongs there, right? He still had on his pants, but he had on his track top. And he goes down to his pants and he pulls up the top of it like a gun. So immediately I'm honing in on this guy and I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? And I'm watching him closely. And it turns out it's a massage gun. A lot of track guys take these massage guns, and if you just look at the top of it, it looks like a gun. So I immediately went from, okay, this to, okay, what's the scenario here? He's got the tracksuit on. Doesn't mean he's necessarily a student, right? We can't assume that, but it's not 100%. And then as I'm watching and I'm looking at it more closely, I see what it is. If you're from a distance and you're looking at this, you're on full alert, right? It's really understanding behaviors too, and looking at what is normal behavior, what is not normal behavior. These are all great. We could go on for 2 hours on all the different factors that are part of situational awareness. But I love, Heather, I love the scenarios. After 9/11, I took my family to Europe and we had a game plan. So I'm with you, my poor kids, my husband and I are both law enforcement. My son turned out to be law enforcement too, but we had a plan. So if something happened, Dad and I would address the threat. My oldest son would address the family and taking the family away. And people go, how normal is that you guys have these conversations? I said, we go through scenarios for everywhere we go. Restaurants, the movies. It's another thing I tell people when you get in, I love to, when I go into a classroom, I have people close their eyes and I said, okay, I want you to tell me how many exits are in this room. Most of them don't get it because they only remember the exits near where they came in. There's so many exits that are closer and that you can escape from that are not where you came in. So it's having that situational awareness to say, where are my points of, like you said, Heather, my egress and ingress? Where can I safely escape? So anyway, like I said, we could go on forever.
This doesn't even have to be a perpetrator scenario. This could be a fire. Coming from the forensics world, if it's bad, I've seen it, I've collected it, I've photographed it. Some of the most horrific things are fires. And you're in a dormitory, the first thing you need to know is where is your exit? And you need to figure out, closing your eyes, walking in that direction, how many approximate steps is that? You're in a hotel in Las Vegas on the 14th floor. Which way do you go? You have to crawl to get out of your hotel room because the smoke is going to be everywhere and you're not going to be able to see. It doesn't always have to be a perpetrator kind of scenario, but if you're in a dorm room with hundreds, if not thousands of kids and there's panic setting in and smoke, you need to know how many crawls away is the exit so you can find it in complete smokiness as you crawl along the floor to get out. It's a fine line between wanting to have kids that aren't having to think these horrible, the world is a horrible place, and balancing it with their safety. The world is also a beautiful place, but the reality is these things do happen and you want to have your kids apply critical thought and be prepared. The chances are slim that they will, but if they do, you're ready.
Yeah, it has to be sold as empowerment. It's a tool, it's empowerment. And
Right.
just as people in law enforcement approach things differently, we do make plans when we go out or with friends or family. Here are the exits, this is what we're going to do. We don't get separated. These are skills that not only in a college setting that we need to teach these young people, that the little group, whoever your little group is, your nucleus, whether it's friends, family, or both, you need to get into the practice of making plans. What happens if I get lost? Let me know where you're going and the time frame that you should be there. Just like the buddy system that was mentioned earlier. We need to put these out on the forefront for students to be safe, especially going to a new environment, especially if they're living on campus. They're adults for the first time living freely, and a lot of times they don't know what to do with that, and they're being a little more risky than they should. We've all been there. It's something that we need to put out on the forefront more than we have. And as I mentioned earlier, it's working together not only with safety professionals or behavior professionals. We have to work as a group in college settings to get this out there and changing the culture. We need to change the culture.
Yeah, and if I could just add, like the body language, a child of a retired social worker for battered women, that's a big one. My mom said that predator, a man or female, whoever is the intimate partner violence, they can typically tell when they walk in a room who they can approach, who's going to be vulnerable, who could potentially be their next victim. Because they can tell by the way they're standing. We were taught you always walk with your head up, looking at your surroundings. And that's really important as a military family. Not only was I military, but my husband as well. One of our safety protocols is we have a box that has everything we need. That it has birth certificates, passports, because if everything burns down, whatever happens, that's all we need. We can replace the material stuff, but we'll be able to do everything else easier because we have everything in one location. We get it from that location and take it with us. It just makes life easier knowing I don't need to gather up things if there's a fire. Or when I go into a restaurant, I'm not sitting with my back to the exit. I'm watching. I know when we go in, we count, how many exits there are, what's the quickest one or what's the closest one. Think about when you're on the airplane, they tell you look for the nearest exit. And it's just like, we really need to focus on that because it is about empowerment. My safety, I have it under control. I know the exits. I am situationally aware of everything that's taking place. I know how many people are in the room. I know how many are male, and all these things just coming in and making an observation. And I think it's imperative that the students know that, because again, I agree with Sylvia. I think it's about self-empowerment. I want to be able to know I can hold my own. I'm watching everything. I'm aware of the exits. I'm aware of somebody who looks maybe a little shady to me that I'm suspect of. And I think too often we discredit our intuition. Like when you talked about with the elevator situation, if I don't feel comfortable, then it's not happening. Because it's like my body's telling me this is not safe. And so I go with that feeling. I'd rather defer to that than risk it and have something happen.
One of the things that would be important in empowerment to explain to people what your body goes through under high stress. Heather, I think you could probably hit on this too, based upon your background. People don't understand that if you've never been in a really high stress situation, You don't know how you lose your gross motor skills. People just don't really think about that, right? Because they've never had to. We want to empower people to know that, hey, this is what your body's going to go through. Things that you could easily do before, finding the key, remembering the code to unlock something, putting the key in the door to turn the door to get out is going to be difficult. I teach breathing first because you can't do anything unless you have oxygen going to your brain. So it's all those things we're talking about. And Heather, I don't know if you can add to that based upon your background, but I think it's really important.
One of the, I don't know who all is on TikTok, but I got sucked in, and there's this Halloween challenge going around right now, which I thought was such a great demonstrative to this losing your fine motor skills. So there's this TikTok challenge with Halloween where you're in a car, you pull up in a driveway with your family member dressed as Jason in the back seat. The challenge is, can you get to your front door before Jason, your family member, gets you? If you don't, you're dead. Nobody can do it. You can feel and see the panic, even though you know you're not going to die, but it's a family member kind of thing. That's the silliness that really demonstrates, even in that scenario, you feel the pressure, you feel this horror story thing coming after you, and you cannot get your key in the front door. And so it's like this contest for these family members, see who can grandpa make it in the front door. And one of the ones I saw, grandpa's head just went through the glass front door because he was so panicked to get away from his son dressed as Jason. I know that's a silly analogy, but the reality of the situation is when you are in a real life scenario like that, it's even far worse. So your motor skills are not going to be, that's even for school shootings, those kind of things. Trying to lock a door when you hear gunfire in the distance is not going to work. There's got to be another plan, and you've got to train first.
I think something that comes to mind with me is that we also have students on our campuses who have different physical abilities. So helping those students feel safe and comfortable in all these situations should be a real priority for all of us. Helping, that may be an individual safety plan where we could work with other offices like the AEO to help those students feel a sense of empowerment, because I can only imagine how difficult that would feel to be in a situation where you couldn't extract yourself. So I think it's important for us to help them have a plan to deal with stuff like that.
That's a great point, and that is something we need to focus more on. A couple of points I wanted to make was that the whole Jason thing, I think that's actually a great training tool. It's like practicing scenarios, and you can learn those Bible skills. We dealt with our board members one time and did a run, hide, fight training. We briefed them, gave them the PowerPoint, talked about what to expect, how to be safe during the drill. We did 3 scenarios with them in about 4 hours. The first scenario, they all failed. We did a debrief on it. We talked about some of the strategies now that they had a physical experience with it. Second time, it was more than 50% improved. The third scenario, they were all on the mark. If you have these trainings and get buy-in, students are going to come to these faculty. You can learn some of these skills quickly, even in your own family, just like the Jason little scenario. You can learn a lot from that. Once you start getting these scenarios in play, you're not deer in headlights anymore. You're able to react. You're not going to panic. You're going to be able to strategize a little bit better. So I think that's actually a wonderful thing they're doing on TikTok if something like that is used in a training format. In fact, when I gave safety presentations, I always used to bring into play the movie Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. How many times did she have an opportunity to stop the threat, but she gave up in the middle of it? You don't. You keep going because in the worst case scenario, you're fighting for your life. If you always think that, try to develop your skills where you're not a deer in headlights. But it's very doable. It's very doable.
It's building that muscle memory. Those
Right.
skills are muscle memory. And that's where in law enforcement, that's how we train. We train consistency. And when you go through a scenario, when your mind goes to that place, you're going to be able to go to your muscle memory of what you have been doing. And so having those scenarios, having that practice to say, this is how my body's going to react, but guess what? I can handle it. Focus and figure out what I'm going to do.
A lot of a survival skill too, and I like to put this out on the forefront as well, is I call it psychological defense. If you have somebody who is a bully or is a perpetrator, a lot of times they do not expect you to respond. Sometimes even a loud shout or a confrontation short circuits their thought process because they're not expecting it. So a lot of shock factor, psychological shock factor, can give you enough time to get out of a dangerous situation.
Think you hit the nail on the head there, because when we get onto the self-defense classes, that's one of the points I was planning to make, is that you really have to know how people are going to react and how you're going to react, and is it practical. Some of these things that they teach, is it really practical for people to do that? Does everybody have the strength and the capability to do some of those things?
I think y'all have covered so many great topics, and so much of what you're talking about can apply in so many circumstances. I know one of the things I want to address too, as we're talking about situational awareness, is the effect of drugs and alcohol, both on your situational awareness and the risk that you might face, and ways to mitigate. Obviously, we're not saying don't drink, don't go to parties, but what are some ways we can mitigate risks? Again, without victim blaming, we're not saying that you're doing anything wrong, but what are some ways we still need to protect ourselves? Even if you were to come to harm, it's not your fault. We're not blaming, but there are things we can do to protect ourselves. And that's something that I think we want to address. And I think alcohol and drugs, as a lot of folks are going to college, kind of experiencing that culture for the first time. What are some things to keep in mind? Tammy, you've taught on this a lot, and others of you have as well.
Yeah, I think that with drugs and alcohol, a lot of people, I come from a different background, half European, so like alcohol was not a big deal. In our house, I think the buddy system is always the best way. We go together, but we also have to have someone who's going to decide and be the designated person who's not drinking, to make sure that we make those right choices. I have a friend group that I travel with. One does not drink or do anything else. And if the others do, she leads, and it's only in our best interest, and so she leads that way. But I will share that I'm from Wisconsin, and my PhD is through the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. They had a party at one of the frat houses, and alcohol was free, and they were putting these stickers on people. And it depended on the color of your sticker, whether you were going to get a roofie that night. And so these things are real at these campuses. Some girls who came together as a group were like, why is yours different than mine? That was the difference. They figured something was not right when you go to a party. If you leave a drink somewhere, you no longer want that drink. I don't want that drink anymore because I don't know what has happened to it. I'm assuming it's contaminated. Going to these parties, knowing where the exits are. But I think that we really should look out for all people at the party. Even if I don't know you and I see that you have had too much to drink and I see somebody leading you upstairs, I'm going to be an active bystander. I'm not going to be passive. I'm going to say, excuse me, I don't, what I'm saying? I'm going to take charge of that person because it just doesn't seem right to me what's happening. And I think we've all been in those type of situations. And too often, I think young people don't use that empowerment. I love that word, Sylvia, because that's what it is, hey, this just doesn't look right to me. So I'm going to go ahead and start asking some questions and talk with her. If she's incoherent or whatever, then she's coming with me. And that's just how it is. So I think that it's really relevant to make sure we have people with us and that we go together as a group and we lead together as a group, and someone is designated as not doing whatever we are doing that evening, because then we know they're thinking with a clear head.
And part of the safety too is in teaching safety and being more responsible about your own safety is that we also have to teach that don't just be a bystander. Don't be a bystander. You got that feeling it's not right. Don't let it happen. Especially young folks in a college setting can build those skills there and take them into their adult lives. So many in society lose that. They see something happening and they become a bystander instead of acting. Sometimes all it takes is just that strong voice interjection, and that's enough to have a person with bad intentions to say, I'm going to go.
I have to facilitate a class for students to have safe parties, and part of that is teaching bystander intervention and just teaching people that everyone has a different level of comfort. I personally would also go right up and say, what are you doing? Come with me. But not everyone is that comfortable. So just teaching them other tools of how to maybe distract, and just that you could say, hey, come over and play this game with me, and just extract the person from that situation in a way that's comfortable for you to do. And if you can't, then also delegate, calling campus safety, calling the police, calling someone else, a responsible person that can come help.
That's a great point, because I always come from the law enforcement perspective. We're going to act. And I sometimes forget that not everybody is built the same way that we are. Thank you for bringing that to the forefront.
We teach at these parties that there should be a sober host. So a sober set of eyes that can help. Everyone wants to have fun in college, and weekends are a time to maybe have a couple drinks and unwind. It's good to have a sober friend in those situations. If you don't mind, I would share a personal experience. When I was a college student, I went to a bar with one of my friends. Someone I knew was there. He was the cute guy from the supermarket that I was working at the time, and he bought me a drink. Within 5 minutes, I was almost throwing up. I couldn't walk, but I was with a sober girlfriend and she got me out of that situation. So anyone could put you in harm's way, even people that you know. It's always important to have someone around that can help like that.
That's a great point. And also, these folks, not only females, males as well, when you're traveling, these kids are going to go on spring break. They're going to have summer break, and they're going to be traveling and partying. They really need to bring these tools that they can learn about the buddy system and accountability as to where my friend is going to be and making sure everybody leaves together. I've been in situations where what you said almost happened to a friend, but I was sober that night. You got to watch out for one another. You can't do it alone, especially if alcohol or drugs are going to be introduced. Biologically, we cannot think clearly. The motor functions diminish a bit, and you're at risk anytime you're drinking, especially if you're drinking in a situation where you don't know everyone, or you're out of town, or in a different environment.
Yeah, that's an important point. Your body will react differently. If you're used to being in your hometown at home and having 2 or 3 drinks, coming to a new situation, being in a different environment, having those same 3 drinks, your body will naturally sometimes react differently to that.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit now. Lindsay has joined us, and I know she is able to share with us some thoughts on college ages when a lot of mental health issues emerge. There's a lot of risk of suicide and mental health crises that come up in college with the added stress, being away from home. All these things can contribute to this. Lindsay, do you want to talk a little bit about the warning signs, things kids can do to help themselves, or services that might be available, things like that in the mental health field?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things about suicide prevention and awareness is that having conversations, we talk about suicide, we normalize people having distressing emotions. We want to continue to keep breaking down that stigma. We've come quite far, but we've still got a ways to go. Now you've got these young adults who are starting school. It's a completely different scenario from what they're used to. They're away from their family. They're away from everything that they've ever known. There's going to be a lot of really big feelings that come along with that. You want to make sure that there are open and honest conversations on campus around, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling anxious? Are you experiencing negative emotions? Being able to make sure that it's addressed and that people don't think, I'm having a really tough time. There must be something wrong with just me. That is one of the really important things you want to focus on. If you have a student that there is concern about, you want to just ask. You want to be direct. If they've been making vague statements or alluding to certain things, you want to be direct. Just come right out and say, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about killing yourself? And giving people the space to open up and talk about it. And you want to make sure that you're doing it in a very calm and non-judgmental way. Another thing to think about is that there is a difference between suicidal ideation and also suicidal intent. So if you've got somebody that says, I don't want to live anymore, that's a lot different than somebody saying, I'm going to go and swallow all the pills in my medicine cabinet, and that's my plan. In 3 hours, I'm going to be overdosing on pills. If you've got somebody that has ideation, you want to try and suss it out. Are you thinking about actually hurting yourself, or are you just hurting and you don't know what else to do? That requires a certain kind of help, but it doesn't necessarily require immediate intervention. If you have somebody that says, no, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do, that's when you have to shift gears, and that's when you have to start looking at the immediate interventions. If somebody is in immediate danger of harm to themselves, then you need to get people involved. I know a lot of schools have counseling centers that have counselors on call 24 hours a day. You can involve them. There are also mobile crisis teams. It's different for every state, but there are mobile crisis teams in quite a few states where you can call a number and have a clinician come out and assess somebody for suicidality, and then they can make the decision on what to do after that. If you are unsure of what possible resources you might have, your local community mental health center is going to be great for figuring out what sort of resources that you have around that.
Always have to bring up the social construct of race, where we all know we're ethnic beings, but reality is in many ethnic communities, there's still a high level of stigma
Absolutely.
associated with mental health. And I think
Yes.
you have to have culturally competent counselors on your campus. You have to have counselors that actually represent your student body. As a service-connected disabled veteran, the person I speak with at the VA about my mental health issues is another woman of color, because you don't understand what I'm going through if you're not living the same life and looking like I do in this life. I think it's imperative not to say that others cannot help me, but just in full transparency, I feel much more comfortable because my counselor has had similar experiences that I've had, recognizing that high level of stigma surrounding mental health, making sure your counselors on campus are culturally competent, that they're not using microaggressions or biases, because we see bias in the clinician field as well as the medical field on a daily basis. I think that you have to make sure that representation is there and that they're getting, if you don't have counselors of color or ethnicity, different ethnicities, that the ones you have are culturally competent, that they're taking classes about implicit bias, that they're taking classes about microaggressions, that they're recognizing what biases that they have so they can check them at the door and engage with students in those communities, whether it's the LGBTQI community or whatever community it is. Because if I feel like you're condescending to me when I speak to you about my mental health, guess what? I'll never come back. I'm not going to come back to that counseling center. It could just be that one individual counselor, but because of that one experience, I won't engage with anyone else from that counseling center, because I'm thinking that's how they all are. And we should never generalize, but that's just the reality that I would see it as a young person. I just think it's really important that people understand there is still very much a stigma associated with minority communities addressing mental health. I've seen where people have been told to pray about it. And it's just like, you have free will, and free will tells me that you need to go to the counseling center because you need some additional assistance, and that's okay. And so again, just remember that every counselor is not for every student. They may need to see someone else. It may be even surrounding issues of coming out. In minority communities, there's a high stigma surrounding the LGBTQI community. And so when, you want to have those conversations and someone wants to come out to their family, that counselor has to be culturally competent and understand the historical aspects within those ethnic communities surrounding LGBTQI, and because I just don't know why it's like that. It needs to stop, but it continues. So we at least have to acknowledge it and talk about it.
I think that Lindsay and Tammy, you guys both totally nailed it. I think that it's a difficult job, especially with incoming freshmen and incoming students, because sometimes there's not that handoff that we traditionally got, right? If they're from their hometown and they went from middle school to high school, there's that kind of soft handoff, right? There is no handoff when they go to college. And Lindsay, you get these kids that are first time away from home, right? Maybe from a family that has LGBTQ biases, and now they're trying to navigate what's going on with school and their friends and their acceptance of themselves and others accepting them. I think having all this information and resources is so critical. And I'm so thankful for the work that both of you do, because it is so important. I think that sometimes people don't understand, if you've never really dealt with mental health, you have a hard time understanding it. Some of it is pure ignorance. It's not malice, it's ignorance. So our job is to educate and empower people about these issues that exist. How do we help students navigate and be successful and find happiness, right? I love both of your comments, so thank you.
Over the years, I've seen students in friend groups trying to help support their friends through mental health issues without coming to people in the school or the counseling service. So I think it's also important to support students or help educate students that they can come to us, they can come to the services that are available. I've seen students shuttering anything from something less minor than suicide, maybe eating disorder. I don't mean to minimize any of this, but not a crisis situation. And they've weathered these things over months without coming to anybody because they were trying to do the best they knew how without coming to anyone in authority. I think it's important to help educate all the students, even if they're helping support other people, the access that they have to counseling services or other things. Because
And
their
you
job
can't
is
always-
to be students, right? We should be the professionals that help. Their job should be doing what they should do as college students.
And you
Also,
can't always think that it's people that have lower grades or great grades. You can have people that are functioning academically really well, but on their personal level, they are falling apart. And so it's just really making sure that all the clinicians are able to identify these students, because they're living amongst us and we don't know that they're hurting. We don't know that they're going through until they have a breaking point. And so that's where Lindsay and Tammy, we're talking about just educating other people about smashing the stigma so that they can seek mental health assistance. Great point, Heidi, with making sure that friends have support as well.
Tammy, you bring up in the context of mental health, the issues of racial and other minoritized groups and special challenges that they're facing on campuses and to their safety, especially when we look at people of color, we look at people in the LGBTQI community, particularly trans women, given the climate nationally right now, who are facing particular challenges. Are there things that you would suggest both for those students, for their own safety, and for the college campuses to support students in minoritized groups to feel safe on campus?
Sylvia and anybody else from Texas or Florida on this call knows that I think in Texas, yours, all our centers have been shut down. That would help any student in the LGBTQI or in a minority group, because our governor has said that's discriminatory towards European Americans. So we don't have any support within, unless it's a private university, for LGBTQI students to go to, where they used to have a center specifically for them to help them. And we used to have Black Students Union and the Asian Student Union. We don't have those any longer because all the funding has been taken away by the governor. What I recommended to my son when he went away to PWI, predominantly white institute, is that he find a friend group. You know, his friend group is diverse because we come from a diverse family. But I think when you have other African-American males that you can share and talk to about some of the issues you're experiencing on campus, I've seen as a faculty member, faculty members commit microaggression and bias against people in the LGBTQI community, against people of color, because they have these very derogatory assumptions. Unless you're an Asian student in sociology, we call them the model minority, because they tend to have higher expectations for them than they do for other ethnic groups. So I would recommend that those students create a community within that community. And know they can also, and what tends to happen is what we call as faculty, the minority tax is the faculty of color. We tend to circle that wagon anyway, and we assist them with the dynamics. And when I'm at the university as a faculty member, I have students who come to me who are not even in my department, but we tend to be one each in each department. And someone has told them, hey, Dr. Hodo's cool, you can go talk with her. And then I provide them with the resources that they need, or just even listen to them about some of the microaggressions or biases they're experiencing within the classroom in some ways that I can help them address them. But I think that reality is if you're at a PWI, you have to understand that oftentimes students of color may not feel comfortable in particular settings because you still have faculty who are not culturally competent. So you will have a student of color in a classroom. I'm an urban sociologist, and we may be talking about the development housing projects, and people make an assumption that the only African-American student I have must have grown up in the projects. I've seen faculty do the exact same thing though. Well, what do you think about that? And it's very disrespectful, and it shows that lack of cultural competence. I think creating that community amongst your peers and your allies. love my allies, because your allies, oh, they're going to say something. They're like not going to be okay with it. Like my LGBTQI friends and colleagues or whatever, if someone says something out of line, if they're not there, I'm going to address it. I'm not okay with that comment. I think that wasn't very respectful. And I'm going to say something. We really have to rely a lot on our allies to help us create that safe space where we feel that we're welcome and that we know all those resources that are available to us. Some universities, what they do with faculty of color is, and I had this happen, which was good, is they had a list for me, places that I could go worship if I were Baptist, places where I could take my son to get his haircut, especially if you're in a small town, places that would be able to cut my hair, things of that nature, just providing those different, and to me, that shows that you want me to be included and have that sense of belonging. So that's something that is just so simple to do. A lot of the Hispanic organizations or African-American organizations, they'll join fraternities and sororities that have been historically for them. And I think that creates that community as well.
I think that brings us to some of the more practical things that we can talk about for tips. As we look at issues related to people of color, to LGBTQI groups, we're also seeing, in addition to that, with the political climate we're in, we saw in the spring that uptick in protests on campus. I happened to be on campus with Heidi at Vassar when they had a pro-Palestinian march in the spring, watched the safety department, how they handled it, how the faculty handled it. It was very peaceful and went really smoothly to see that. What advice can we give both to schools that might be facing this and more to students who may want to go to these protests? How do you stay safe in that kind of a setting when in those kind of large groups, but whether it's protests, and some of these will apply to other large group settings, how to keep safe in that? A lot of it is situational awareness again, but are there other particular tips that you can give for that? I know, Heidi, I know you've experienced that.
Yeah, so
Sylvia?
at our school, we try to speak to the organizers of the events first and have them identify people who are peacekeepers. So they would be someone that would be easily identifiable. Sometimes they would wear like a lanyard or a vest. And that's someone that they can tell the people in their protest or demonstration that they can come up to that person should they feel unsafe, and they help be the liaison between us or the administration and the group. So that seems to be very successful here thus far. Most of the students have helped and participated in that way when we've spoken to them.
I think it's also important to let your students know that if they are protesting or doing a demonstration, you respect that constitutional right and that you're there to make sure they're safe, that you're not the enemy. I'm speaking from a law enforcement's perspective here, like campus police. You let them know that, yes, you are free to do your demonstration here. Keep it peaceful. If you need anything, let us know. Because a lot of times in protests or demonstrations, you have an outsider that comes in that is going to be the instigator to make that group look bad. So we have to be aware of all of that, but we also have to be accommodating to them. I know we had one little demonstration on campus before I left. And anytime I told my guys, don't interfere with them, just let them know you're there for support. They were a little fearful of the police department at first, but we're like, no, if you need anything, let us know. We're here to make sure you're safe. You have a right to do what you're doing. Just don't force anything on anyone. Peacefully demonstrate. And things worked out very well. But they have to know that you are on board, that you are supporting their constitutional right, that they have a right to do their demonstration, but you're going to be there as an aid if needed.
Can I just add, Sylvia, I think that is so important that they know that the police are their allies, that they're there to protect them. And in certain communities, we don't feel that. You know, it's just the reality. And historically, we've seen why certain communities feel that way. So I always think it's great when we do have law enforcement that are engaging with our student population on a regular basis. So if something does happen, then they're able to say, hey, I know Sylvia, I know Chief such and such, let me go talk with them. Because we've seen, and I appreciate you talking about how an outsider will come in, because we saw that with the Black Lives Matter movement, to make it appear one way, where it wasn't even the people who were marching who were instigating or burning down things. It was outsiders who were coming in. And I think that we find that a lot. That goes back to the story I shared about my friend in Louisiana, making that assumption that guy was a student who was talking to the faculty member. People are very methodical about how they plan out exactly what they're going to do. Why don't you use that time to plan something good or do something good instead of trying to wreak havoc and create this divisiveness that we do see on campuses surrounding different identities and different protests?
I was very fortunate to build a department that was open to issues and helpful. And that's one thing I can say I was proud of, to build a department that way, because we are the service people. We not only enforce, but the main thing we do is service. And I think that can diffuse a lot of situations if you get your community to know what you stand for and that you're going to be there to serve them and help them through a situation, because everybody has a right to demonstrate.
I think the other thing we want to address today is, I think we've touched on it a little bit when we talked a bit before about making sure that you're not sharing your location on social media and being careful on what you share on social media. But are there other tips for cybersecurity or even personal security for things like your computer in your dorm room or property? Some practical advice for folks living on campus or visiting campus in the library. What advice would you give for some of those issues?
I could probably speak a little bit to that. Again, I think a lot of it is, I think it was Tammy who said it so well about a campus being a microcosm of the larger community. You're going to have burglars. You're going to have people who do bad things. So a lot of it comes down to critical thought. You think like a bad guy. If you're going to leave your dorm room open and unlocked, obviously you should never be victimized, but the reality is it could happen. So being diligent about having a conversation with your dorm mates. If you are walking into or outside of the entire dorm facility and you see the door propped open because people are just coming in and out, that door needs to be closed. There are some environmental design scenarios that there's even so much as for females, you can buy it looks like a dress in a kind of a suit packaging that you hang in your closet, and it's really a hanging safe that looks different. So you can slide your laptop in there. You can use the tiles and the little tracking devices. There's also laptop security devices that you can strap to a desk. If you are allowed to bring in pieces of furniture, there are little pieces of furniture where you can have a little locked drawer. And so that's where all of whether you're taking jewelry on campus or your laptops or things like that, and doing those extra added things that would make it less easy for somebody to come in and take advantage of a grab and go scenario. So thinking like the bad guy, one of the things was, whether it's stolen or lost, I highly recommend that kids put their stuff into some kind of well-vetted cloud. If you lose your laptop or it gets broken or stolen, you're using Amazon's backup cloud or Google, so that you're not going to lose out on time for your homework or whatever else it is. So those situations.
I'd like to speak to what we're experiencing here. The job market and internship market, it's wide open. And we're seeing a lot of scams trying to offer students internships. It appears like it's coming from an internal employee. The person will identify themselves as being affiliated with the institution. And remote work opportunities. We have to warn students that if it sounds very vague and you're not really clear what the skill set is for it, you should be suspicious if it appears to come from an internal email. Do not give out any personal identifying information. Go to the college directory, look that person up, call them, do your research. We have a division within our college that offers and facilitates those internships. Don't just get baited by that quick, easy job that's going to pay you well, but it doesn't really describe what you're going to be doing. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And don't be hasty. Do a little homework and verify that really is an opportunity, and there's so much focus on the elderly getting baited on this. Our young students are an equally vulnerable population when it comes to these phishing type scams. And next thing you know, they've turned over PII and or even given somebody money. I think back 15, 20 years ago where it was, oh, we send you a check, you deposit it, oh, but we need 50% of that money back. And then By the time your bank catches up to the fraudulent check, you're already out some of those funds. So there's just new iterations of that these days. They exploit the vulnerable and the naive a little differently. But I think we need to warn them not only about device security, but then once you are online, be a little hesitant and not so trusting of everything that comes into your inbox.
If I can add to that, one of the scams we're seeing that I just remembered when you said that, just horrible, because I think I would fall victim to this. It's not only happening around the college campuses in Southern California, but even some of the really nice beachy downtown areas. Somebody is going to the effort of either they're printing out QR codes and in a sticker, and they're pasting it over like the parking where you have to pay to park, and it takes you to what looks to be a legitimate website, and then you put in your credit card information or your debit card information, and they've just completely scammed you. Or you click on that QR and it brings up a website and you hyperlink, and now you have malware. I never in my wildest dreams would have thought to just pay to park on an app that looks purely legitimate. It has the branding, it has everything on it, but somebody has put a sticker over the QR that is fraudulent. That's a new thing I just heard about in the last couple of days that's going on here. Have no doubt with social media, it will spread. Just having that baseline critical thought for kids. Take a second and think, why is that raised? The skimmers that they have at the gas stations, like people have known about that forever. This parking thing new to me, and it's just, they're pretty creative.
In addition to what Chief and Heather said, I think a simple philosophy to create with our students or anybody is that nothing is for free or as good as it looks. If people are phishing and scamming, if I'm not seeking it out and something comes to me that looks your first, I deal with that. If you get into the practice of not expecting anything free, because nothing ever is free, that should be the first red flag. Nothing's free. If people are marketing to you, for instance, if somebody comes to my house, I never answer my door. I don't answer my phone calls. I screen everything. If I want to engage with somebody, then I'm going to reach out to them in a formal way. But I've even told family members, and this is a philosophy I've always had, don't come knocking on my door because I will not answer it unless you are expected there. So when things are coming to you, you have to be really critical about it, because you don't know what motives are behind it. That way it puts you in the driver's seat, so to speak, that if I want something, I will seek it out. Nothing is free.
We live in a digital credit card age, right? Everybody has credit cards and debit cards. College students have multiple cards. And when they get these messages that say, hey, somebody's committed fraud on your account, call us immediately. We tell people, do not call that number. Call the number on the back of your card. Do not call that number, because then they'll say, we need to verify your account number. They give them their account number. It's crazy to think that, and kids are so smart, right? But at the same time, we're all gullible in some ways. We really just have to do that education so that they don't fall into these traps. The other thing is the whole, your delivery of the package. We need you to contact us versus the delivery of this package, open up and see if it was misdelivered. And every college student is waiting for a package from home or Amazon or Costco, and they click
Right.
on it. It's like clickbait. And so it's important that we look at safety in all realms to say, how do we educate kids, and making sure that every student has the safety app on their phone. Almost every college has the safety app that they can get to right from their cell phones. Some of the kids don't have it. So if there's a lockdown on campus, they need to know. That's one of the most important things that I share with kids too.
It's hard to believe, but we have somehow made it all the way this 90 minutes. It went so quick. I want to thank our panel so much for being here today. I also want to let everyone here know I've added several handouts to our Eventbrite page. If you go to where you got the link for today's program, you will find handouts from both Deep Rep Safety, and I know Nina gave us one from her company, that give you some little bit more advice and flesh out a lot of the topics we've talked about today. If for some reason you have trouble accessing those, just reach out to me at Bethany@deeprep.com, and I can make sure that you get all that material. I'm also going to post right now in the chat our feedback link if you'd be willing to share what you thought of today's program. We'd love to hear from you. And I know we've only got a couple minutes left, but if anyone wants to hang around for a minute, I'd welcome any last thoughts from our panelists, anyone who has anything that we didn't get to that they wanted to, or last advice you might have.
If I could just talk briefly about intimate partner violence and how important it is on college campuses. I know when I was a faculty member, I did the One Love Foundation program. And I really liked that program because it teaches from a real perspective of a college student who, when she tried to break up with her boyfriend, he actually beat her to death. And I think that oftentimes we got a lot of young people who mentally are not mature enough to be in these relationships, and they don't know how to deal with the conflict that may come with it, or they don't know how to basically shut someone down when they begin to try to dominate. Let me always know where you are and what those signs look like. And I think it's just really important that all colleges and universities educate them on that, because I think we have too many students who fall prone to that. But with that being said, I also want to include that males can be victims of intimate partner violence as well. I think that we don't have that discussion, and the male is, with stigma associated surrounding that, doesn't want to report it. So I think those are important things that universities have to think about too, as you get these new students coming in. Do they know how to process this information? Do they have the information available to them? Who do they report? Who's the Title IX coordinator? All these things, which we know are in the syllabi. But again, just making sure that as part of maybe the onboarding or the orientation process, that is one of the components that it covers, that intimate partner violence, because it's prevalent on campuses, and especially with the drinking and with drugs and sexual assault. So I just wanted to add that component. And one last thing, I appreciate that someone said, to your point about representation with counselors, it's important to have that representation with police and safety as well. And I would have to agree that you do have to have that cultural competence, but the representation of the student body should be reflective in your safety and your police on campus, because it's just a level of comfort that people have going to people who are similar to them. It's a bias that we all have. It's the similarity bias, and just being comfortable with someone who's in a similar community. So thank you.
That's great stuff, Tammy. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you to the panel for being here. For those who are members of Interact, the recording will be available. If you're interested, I'm going to put my email in the chat. You can reach out to me if you have any questions about that membership or anything else we can help you with. Thank you all so much.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.